Good morning, all. Apologies for the slight delay. As we come towards the end of a very eventful year, we have to allow people a little bit of extra time. Some of us are already in holiday mode. So let me officially welcome you to Mazar's Reshape Future Fitting Your Business webinar. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but I promise you by the end of the session, you will fully appreciate why we have chosen the tagline Reshape. By way of introduction, my name is Ishan Bawani. I'm the head of Mazar's Public Sector Advisory Business and also the Director of Governance and Strategy. I'm sure many of you, like me, have reached our pain threshold when it comes to all matters COVID. And whilst it's a real practicality in our day-to-day lives, how many of us actually understand the systematic steps we need to take in our businesses to weather the storm? Indeed, some of us may be lulled into a false sense of security because we have returned to work and our businesses have started operating again. But do you know that even if your company has been fortunate enough to survive the lockdown, there's still an imminent threat in the next 12 to 18 months? Do you actually know if your business is sustainable, and have you stress tested yourself in the event that we have another disruption? And it's actually times like these that we as professionals have to congregate and remind ourselves that individuals and as companies, we have a greater responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the families of our employees. Today, we want to share with you a pragmatic, systematic approach outlined over 6 easy to follow phases to assist you navigate this crisis and future fit your business. The aim today is to guide you to assess your current position and operational challenges, and we want to combine this with scenario planning, and financial forecasting so that we put you in a position to make the most informed decisions. Look, we only have an hour to do this, and so I'm not going to delay further. I'm going to hand over to the intelligent part of the Mazars team, Bongi and Jaime, who will go into more detail on the Reshape program. Before I hand over to Bongi, though, I do remind you to please post your questions in the chat, and time permitting, we will respond to them or to as many of them as we can at the end. Where we are unable to respond, we commit to you to take a note of the questions and respond via email. We'd like the session to be interactive as possible, obviously, but with webinars and the practicalities thereof, we have to respond to questions via a Q&A session at the end. So, guys, I hope you enjoy today's webinar. Please ask as many questions as you can. This is actually a very useful, very practical tool, so I implore you to take advantage of it. And without wasting any more time, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Bongiwe. Thank you, Bongiwe.
Thank you, Ishan, and good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure for us to be able to share with you today what we have put our heads together on, both on a South African perspective and on a global scale, to bring closer to us, our clients, our business communities, the actual how we are supposed to navigate our businesses as we go forward. A lot has been said in respect to where we need to get to start this path on what we are supposed to be doing in the recovery phase post-COVID. By way of introduction, my name is Bongiwe Mbunge. I'm a consulting partner at Mazars. I oversee business sustainability and the strategy as well as the reporting side. That also include ESG, environmental, social, and governance, risk assessment matters. Secondly, I also oversee human resources advisory as a division. So, we are here today because we are constantly working on better methodologies, but most importantly, practical methodologies to come closer to our clients, which is you, and to really come and present and say, this is what we have stress tested, this is what we have researched over these many years, this is what we have tested out in different parts of the world to deliver something that is quite peculiar and also fits the purpose of your business. So to set the context of Reshape, we have, really been, this is as a result of us working in the last decade at least to pay special focus on privately owned businesses. And the exciting bit for me is always the intent of knowing that the development of how we put programs and methodologies such as Reshape in front of you is because across our 92 countries where we are present, we have got the ability of driving this through a hub from country to country, ability to tap into other experts, which are our colleagues at Mozars, and really look at businesses from a sector lens, from a relationship lens, and also from a practical reality and local context. So this morning we are taking you through the 6 phases to answer the how, because we have been inundated with literature that seems to suggest to us how that it's time to actually reshape your business. How do you build it to be resilient, future fit? But not enough people get into the nuts and bolts of it. So what I'm going to share with you now, we've broken this presentation up into 2 sections. I will cover the first 4 phases, and my fellow partner Jaime will do the last 2. So please, I do remind you that as we proceed with the presentation, jot down your notes, put it in the live Q&A, so that we can be able to interact as much as possible at the end. So what I want to put in front of us today is that, the COVID pandemic has happened. We are now in South Africa at level 1, where we see much more business activity and initiation. But truth be told, we do analyze our numbers. We have seen the impact. We have had to part ways with some employees. We've had to look around us and really take note of how the business, as we know, has actually transitioned to the next phase. So the methodology that we are, practicing and really bringing to us today takes us from pre-COVID to get into a state where we can form a basis that we can move on from. So in phase 1 of how we are, taking you through the journey, we look at a few things. And one of the things that we'd like to understand is, what is the base, but is it as a result of the business was on its way down already, or is it really a COVID impact, and to what extent? And this is why we start this journey in terms of the business advisory segment that we are sharing with you today, to look at the pre-COVID track record in terms of the finances, the last 3 years, and we break them up into key ratios so that we understand. You might ask yourself, why are we drilling down in terms of these few ratios when there are pages and pages of narratives in terms of a financial statement? It is because when we pre-COVID, when we launched a methodology for the privately owned business segment, we quite understood that after consulting with 70,000 businesses over a 4-year period, we then arrived at key matrix that will tell us from business to business across sectors. This is, if we look at these key ratios, we have the ability of benchmarking and deducing comparative standing and figures of businesses to assess return on investment, the performance, and the risk factors as well. So this is the phase that is a desktop review phase, that we have the ability of receiving a financial statement, we put them into the portal, and we start laying out the numbers. The value is not in that. The value is in our experts having the ability to read into those numbers, understanding your business, and also understanding the sector in which you operate. But this we will explain much more in terms of when we get to the illustrative model that Jaime is going to take us through. how this information comes together from the pre-COVID into the next phase. So I do invite you to stay with us as we go through those elements. The second phase is really starts to get practical for me. This is where we are assessing the impact. And in assessing the impact, it's very pertinent for us to say, you know, which numbers are we actually going to interrogate? But further than that, it's actually to come to a place of saying, how have the different phases of what we have and continue to go through, continue to impact the business? And we break these down into an acute phase, suppression and recovery. The acute phase, as loosely defined, and I'm saying loosely defined because it varies from country to country and region to region, is really talking to the lockdown period. This is where the greatest pain has been felt. This is where the reaction has mostly, you know, from aspects that you do not have control of, has been experienced in the acute phase. And this is where many businesses locally even have really battled to come to grips with how to actually navigate themselves out of this. We would have seen in the hard lockdown how this particular phase has also seen a lot of activity in terms of financial support that comes from different institutions, financiers, the public sector in terms of the state aid as well, and we take all of those things into account. And what we want to come out with, you know, when we look at these phases in terms of acute suppression and recovery, suppression is probably at the end of like a pronounced level 1 that we are in now. We're starting a suppression phase whereby things are really, there's a stimulus on economic activity, and things are starting to take shape and form. I do want to say that when we look at the recovery phase, this is the aspect that is not a sprint but a marathon. The anticipation here is anything between 18 to 24 months and beyond, to allow the recovery phase to really sink in, and for you to be able to reshape your business, and also, you know, to settle in the new direction in the sphere that you have been able to take. So if you look at it from acute phase right through to recovery, we are looking at a period, you know, a journey of anything between 3 to 5 years. So how we actually impact, you know, analyze the impacts that we are looking at now is to have a look at different elements, and you will see it on screen as you see it there, the gross profit, the net profit, asset base, etc., etc. But scrutiny always lies on the top line. You know, everyone is analyzing that deeply. The processes that inform how we arrive at that, and really the segmentation of the different revenue streams that you have, and a full-on understanding of the ambition and of the business, to fully demonstrate, even through numbers and discussions, how we will be able to reshape the business for future fitting it. So it's about also identifying the gaps, the major gaps that are sitting as we measure the performance of the business, and we come up with themes, because it is quite time consuming and not worthwhile to get into every nitty-gritty that could resemble a gap, but then we look for the overarching systematic themes that are the big themes that we can have an ability of drilling down into, contextualizing, crafting numbers on, and really start to measure performance. This for me is the most exciting one, because this is also now starting to incorporate, you know, the vision behind operations. We start to bring in a conversation from a shareholder perspective and say, what are your core priorities? How are you defining what is critically important to you? Because business is further than just numbers. It encompasses the goals, you know, that shape the business, that have probably, spoken into the purpose of its existence, and we take the time to understand that. In this critical discussion, what is important to note is that on the right hand side, as you see, is a priority scale, and this priority scale is really trying to determine on these researched phases of what are things that lie, on the front of mind of shareholders as you see them. It moves from absolute non-negotiables and absolute urgent matters and somewhat, unprioritized aspects. So if I can make an example as you look on screen, we can quite see that the top 3 aspects here are priority. And that speaks to solvency. The cash gap is the first one, really keeping things tight, working with what you have, and making sure that you can build on from there as much as possible. The second one is the competitive edge. In the unlisted business space within South Africa, it's highly competitive. And so therefore, really what's pertinent into these shareholders, like the unique selling point. What is the unique value proposition? We want to make sure that that stays in top form. The third one is really looking at retention of ownership. So this simply means that irrespective of what the numbers say, we do not want to dilute equity. We want to retain control. So therefore, it tells us that the solution space needs to incorporate other things, but not actually touch equity. If you look at the bottom as to what is least important, what's probably not so much of a priority, it's availability of government support for this particular case study, and really collaborating with competitors, suppliers, and as well as consumers. But right in the middle is a critical mass point of stakeholder engagement, whether it be with clients, with the human capital within the business, with financiers, with regulators, etc. But there's a huge element of stakeholder engagement that is really not as important as the cash gap, but sits in the heart of this conversation. So when we get into the solution space, this is quite important for us to be able to model, because we have seen a lot of theory. We've seen a lot of theoretical studies being brought into business, wasting everybody's time, documents defending themselves by just the number of pages it has against us actually delving into them and reading them. This then aims to stay away from some that's an academic exercise, but really just gives us the ability to delve into it and to really come out with a management pack. How are we going to prioritize what is important to this business, and how we're going to strategize the way forward is what we are trying to get to the bottom of as we are navigating through this particular aspect. Now, it's not until we get to this phase 4, and before I get into what sits in the crisis action plan, I do want to say that the journey between phase 1, 2, and 3 is light in terms of the time requirement. You might sit there and ask yourself, oh, this is a lot to take in, and I'm not sure that I can commit so many hours into it. So phase 1 and 3 is really quick and easy, with a deeper conversation that probably takes anything between 60 and 90 minutes when we carve out the core priorities of the business, but then we get into the action plenary mode. And this is where the interrogation of the numbers starts to take shape and form, and we see how we move certain blocks, and we study the patterns of behavior and the ripple effect throughout the rest of the line items, and really until we model 2 to 3 viable options that we can be able to put in front of you as a client to say, actually, with limited risk, this is what you have as a potential return, and so on and so on. The most critical thing is that the solution that is presented collaboratively is owned. It maintains its ownership with the business itself. So we then take a slightly back seat in terms of really staying there behind you as a basis of support, as a basis of accountability, as a checkpoint. However, the ownership of the solution is what's critical to be owned in terms of the business. So in the crisis action plenary, this is the development phase now, where we are, we continue to assess the needs of the business, but what are we actually looking at? And this is where you see the 6 numbers on the right. Not everything is based on a magical 6, I promise you. It's just by a coincidence. So the top line I've spoken to a little bit as I was in phase 3. What's important is that each one of these 6 items are then delved into in the different phases of acute, suppression, and recovery phase. Because just because the top line, number 1, top line sales, has taken a real knock in the acute phase, which is the harder lockdown phase, does not mean that it will behave as such as time goes on, and hence there is a need to classify these into the different segments. So top line is one thing, segmentizing of top line further into saying we've got 3 or 4 streams of revenue, and we know and we have seen and experienced that 2 of them remain resilient while the other 2 are battling. Actually, one of them is actually taken a knock. And as we model these things in the different phases, the pertinent question will always come: should we sustain the weak performing one? Is there a vision for it in the future? And how do we actually anticipate that? Or we'll carry it because for the purposes of 1, 2, and 3, but we actually anticipate that there will be a pickup in the recovery phase. Or no, this is the end of the road. It's actually not viable anymore. We've demonstrated it and we've got numbers to prove that. So other aspects that usually are left to chance in some aspects are, further than operations and supply chain. As you know, that supply chain presents a lot of risk sometimes, a lot of risk that's unknown because we don't look that deeper. But, if we see this on a value chain perspective, we start to appreciate that the more robust that relationship and the more resilient and responsive it is, it starts to future-proof how we move forward. Why is this important? Is because it plays into the narrative of the cash gap and also the responsiveness thereof. In difficult times, you want your critical stakeholders to be on board with you so that you may continue to service your debts, deliver to your clients, protect your human capital, have a higher responsive supply chain aspect. So, but in supply chain it's not only risk that lies there, there's also a lot of untapped opportunity, and in that big middle part of stakeholder engagement, unless we unlock it through that stakeholder engagement, we're actually not going to have that benefit within the supply chain. The challenge or the opportunity that has been experienced by many of us sitting around this virtual table is the aspect of agile management. Management as we knew and saw it prior to crisis mode has rapidly changed over this time. It's demanding something that looks different, that we might not even necessarily have this full skill set to set it on its wheels. But what does it look like, and how do we re-engineer the expertise that we have fit for purpose for the journey that we have started on? So that first high level block there that we've spoken into now as core themes that have come out from our research and our practical advisory over the last decade have really proven themselves in terms of the things that need to be on the table in terms of the discussion when we delve into reshaping and reformatting and resetting any business for the future that we would like to have. But at the end of the day, crisis and agile management is also not a result of its own ambition. it has to find its connection to the shareholder strategy conversation. And when those two really interconnect, it's easier then for us to align everything else in terms of management and operations and see these things play out into its best format for the purposes of the business. So, but what is most exciting, I think, is the fact that we have the ability to have that forward-looking conversation. So we are known as your auditors, many of you around this table, and here we are today and saying, actually, what you may not have known in depth is how matured our business advisory is on a present forward-looking perspective, and really staying in there is part of being your accountability and sense checking professional to aid you in terms of this new venture and journey that you have taken. So what we really want to get to is a lean and mean structure, and that does not always speaks to only rands and cents or only efficiencies and productivity. It also speaks to a smart business, and how do you actually transform your operations to be at that place whereby you are well positioned to thrive into the future. As I've said and I've mentioned previously, it's quite clear to us that this is not a sprint, it's not a 100-meter race. It is really, a marathon. So it's important that in the solution space, it's properly segmented, clarified, so that we know what we ought to achieve and unlock at which intervals. And that really encourages us as we move forward. So to round up the first 4 phases is really the objective has been to give you a high level understanding of the arena that we are playing in, and we have been playing in for the last number of years, to be able to really remain relevant in the times that we find ourselves in, and also not only relevant but provide a solution space that can assist you to thrive much more, because too many times we dwell on or we look at what has been the negative effect of the pandemic, but actually this exciting bit lies on the other side, and the ability of being able to be agile as we are reshaping our businesses. So I'm going to end off with something that says to us, it's not only that we anticipate, many things can be anticipated, including a subsequent lockdown period, but how do we make sure that we bolster in resilience? And the only way that we can bolster in resilience into any business is to actually take the sustainability strategy as defined and center it at a core. So it doesn't necessarily affect the what you are doing, but the how and the what does it mean is significantly unpacked. So at this moment, I'm going to take a pause and hand over back to Ishan as we prepare for Jaime. Thank you.
Thank you, Bongi. Yeah, always a pleasure listening to Bongi, and thank you for your brief overview of phase 1 to 4. Now I'm going to hand over to the other half of the intelligent team, Jaime. Jaime will just do a brief introduction of himself and take us through phase 5 and 6, and also share with you guys a practical assessment that you can complete to give you guys a high-level overview of your business as well. So without wasting much time, Jaime, over to you.
Thank you, Ishan and Bongiwe, and a very warm welcome to everyone from our side. As Ishan said, my name is Jaime Swanepoel. I'm an audit partner at Mazars, based in the Cape Town office. I have been a partner for the last 21 years, so I'm a fully depreciated partner. So I have to throw in that little accounting joke because I will deal with rands and cents of this whole program. My typical clients are high net worth individuals and undermanaged businesses. I don't only give them an audit site or service to them, but I regularly sit with my clients and we talk about the businesses and I give them business advice and help them develop strategies. And because of this, the partnership has felt that I should be the country leader for this sustainability program, Reshape. So every client that goes through this, I will oversee to ensure that we do find a practical implementation and plan for the client and that's relevant to the industry. So I will, as said, I will deal with phase 5, which is the rands and cents. As Bongiwe explained, during the first 4 phases, we set up a baseline and determine what are the strategies and objectives of the shareholders. Now, during this stage, I don't want to sit down just around a table and develop nice plans or dreams or ambitions that we all strive to, but we actually want to develop some concrete plan, a roadmap for management to guide the business through these difficult times. So this is where the financial side comes in, because we'll take whatever you have as your current financial reports or forecasting, and we'll then rework that in order to develop a plan going forward for the short term, medium term, and long term. Now that plan will take various options and scenarios into account, and we'll set out for management a plan that covers the most probable line of action and results, as well as the worst case scenario in case something goes wrong, but also the best case scenario. So not only do we plan to mitigate the impacts of the COVID crisis, but we also look at market opportunities that make themselves available to you in your marketplace due to COVID, and maybe new sales lines, as Bongiwe said. So that's all worked into a financial plan that we ensure that does meet up with the objectives and priorities that were set out by the shareholders or management in phase 3, as Bongiwe has said. So what is nice about the plan is that we give immediate short-term goals as well as long-term goals. So what then happens if something changes or new information comes about or there's some change in the market, these plans can be easily adapted and reworked and new plans created. So that gives management a real active live tool in order to make sure that they can track and record exactly where they're heading towards with the objectives that's set and the goals that's set through this program. So after the phase 4, 5, we get to phase 6, which is the actual implementation stage and the monitoring stage. So during this stage, management will have a full report with all objectives, a roadmap with the financial results. So it's quite easy for them to monitor the actual results against the anticipated results on a monthly or quarterly or yearly basis, and take corrective actions where needed should there be any deviations from what was planned. As I said earlier as well, so if there's a severe deviation and it's found that the plan may be inaccurate, we can always update the plan with the new information that comes about. So it's a very effective management tool to use and to measure to make sure that the plan is there to guide ourselves through this crisis time. The markets also change and we accept that. So once we have the baseline information for you on the system, and as the environment changes or market opportunities come about, we can update the plan to take these into account. So this becomes like a living document and a working relationship with Mazars in your business to help you through all processes in the business. Bongiwe has measured before also that this actually comes from another program that we do use called Optimize. So Optimize has been around and has been field tested considerably throughout the country's Mazars service and the client base that we have. And this was just slightly changed in order to make the current COVID-19 crisis come into that program, into focus this on the COVID-19. But once we out in the final phase and this full recovery of the business, it doesn't mean you should stop having a plan to guide your business. And that's where Optimize then comes into role, and there you can use Optimize to govern your business throughout the remaining period of your business life cycle. So very important the whole time is to monitor your actual results to what has happened and what was planned, because we have to ensure that what objectives has been set are actually achieved and the plans that was laid is achieved. And therefore we present to you a forward-looking set of financial results, a balance sheet, an income statement, which is simplified so you don't have all the IFRS and IFRS for SME adjustments and so forth. So management can easily understand where the business should be. That also identify any needs that the business might have. For example, if the business is entering in a new market segment, then what will be the cash flow implications for that? Will I need to go borrow money? We don't go borrow the money. Will it be a short-term loan? Will it be a long-term loan? So all of this will come out through the financial planning and financial modeling that we use through this program. So all the plans and actions, we have to ensure that it's appropriate for your business, and that we achieve by having a dedicated partner that's an industry specialist in your area of business that will be actively involved with you through the whole process. And even after we give you your results or the plan, we'll keep on having a feedback session to ensure that you understand, that you're online, that you measure your results, that you fully understand what it all means. So we would like to have a partnership going forward in this whole process with you. So those are the technical sides of this whole program that we're proposing. But what it practically means for you is that we have to do a initial self-assessment. Now the self-assessment is done through a Mazars website. If you're already a Mazars client, naturally you can still contact your partner and ask them to assist you. We do, however, strongly advise you to complete the online assessment because it does give us a very good snapshot as to what your current thinking is and what your current challenges are of your business that we can assist with. If you do allow me a few seconds, I would like just to show you where you can find this self-assessment tool on our website. So just give me a few seconds. Okay, this is the Mazars South Africa main landing page for Mazars. So if you then go to your business, to privately owned businesses, and if you scroll down to the sub-menus, you will see there is the Reshape Crisis Recovery menu. If you click on that, it will then bring you to the actual landing page for this program. There's a lot of information here, but if you go to what's called the Reshape Assessment Tool, if you click to that, it will then take you to a landing page where you'll do a 3-step process in order for us to give you ideas to what your business is facing. The initial first page, which is on the screen at the moment, is just some background and contact information and section information about your business, because this will help me to understand your business on a high level point of view, to make sure that we do appoint the right consultant and or partner to look at your business through the whole process. I'm not going to complete the full thing, but once you entered all your details, you'll go to the next step, which will have a list of questions about your business and how you perceive the threats. That will then create for us a heat map. So if I can just go back to my slides quickly. That will create a heat map. Now the heat map is not a what's now available to you at this stage. This will be sent to me, as I will then use that as a, like I said, a source document in order for me to see who are the best people to make contact with you to take this process further. This is an example of a heat map that was completed by a pilot client of ours. So you'll see that is basically divided into 5 pillars of the business, being the financial side, the operational side, the leadership side, the innovation side, and the business operations. And then that's then further is broken down to various categories underneath. And with the high risk or most impacted areas being the darker ones, the maroon colored ones, the least impacted ones are the green ones on the right hand side there. So this can give me a good idea as to what your current impact is and what the focus will be when you go and talk to you. So once that is made available, like I said, we assign a dedicated relevant team to you that will make contact with you. They will then tell you what information we will need. We'll set up a initial facilitation session. Now during this facilitation session, that's where we will cover what Mongiwe has said through phase 1 to 4. Ask those questions. So what we do is they sit with the shareholders, if they're available, and management, and through targeted questions will lead the conversation or grow the conversation into relevant areas of the business to ensure that we all understand what the business needs are and what will the focus be going forward, what the goals are, what the objectives are, and what information is needed in order to achieve that. So during the facilitation process, the Mazars person will take notes and ask the relevant questions, and management and shareholders will mainly give the answers and the thought process. So we'll then take that away. The Mazars team will come to the office and then enter it into our financial modeling and other information products in order to generate the report. Initial report is then presented to management and shareholders to ensure that we're on the right track. Now, based on our experience of our pilot groups, most of the clients has requested that we have another follow-up session, like a facilitated session, to make sure that the new thoughts that they've not thought about in the first process can be discussed and tabled and worked out and so forth. So there might be that the initial report will be slightly delayed, but the initial report will be presented, will be fine-tuned and updated with some of the outputs from that discussion, and then we'll present the final report. As I mentioned earlier, the final report is not the end of our interactions with you. We'll do regular follow-ups, and that can be determined based on the needs of the client as to how regular that will be, and what that follow-ups normally are. Is that, are you getting right? Do you need another session that we talk about where you're at and what needs to change? Do we need to update our plans? So we really try to help management throughout the process until the business has fully recovered. Then the question we normally get from our clients is, how long does this take? How much hours is involved with it? And what information do I need? Because we're all very busy trying to save our businesses and we don't have free time to spend on this. Now, my answer on that is that any time that you spend on this to secure and make your business sustainable is good hours to spend. The good news, though, is there's not a lot of hours needed from you. Normally, for an owner-managed business of a medium size, it's about a 2-hour introduction session that we facilitate to get all the information. In that session, we work through your last 3 years of financial information to get the baseline, to understand the business, look at the ratios, then discuss going forward. What are the business plans? What do you want to achieve in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? How do you think you will get to those targets? What are your competitors doing? What are the stumbling blocks or the roadblocks in your way? How can we get that's removed from the business? How do we make the business more lean and mean? So that will be the facilitation session with all those financial information. Then lastly, we got the management's input. So we normally ask that management prepare for that meeting to make it as sufficient as possible. So you can see that the time needed will be the actual meeting time 2 hours, but there's a bit of preparation time there. And if your accounts are not up to date, we highly and strongly recommend that you get your accounts up to date. That is not a waste of time, because if your accounts are up to date, you've got a better idea as to what goes on in your business. So once we have that time spent, that will probably be the most time that you will spend on this whole process. Then we have the possible additional facilitation session for 2 hours, and then the final feedback session for 1 hour. Like I said, right through the process, there's not much time that we overwhelm you with Mazars people at your office, but I think it's sufficient time for us to understand your business and for you to have a soundboard to talk to a Mazars or industry expert to voice your needs and so forth. The feedback we received from our pilot groups across the world is that the benefit they see is not just in the report that they get at the end, which acts like a roadmap, but it is those facilitation sessions where the leading questions do open up their minds as to possibilities for the business, what they need to do, and that was very helpful for people. And we have seen for the 2 or 3 clients who already did this program with that, yes, the plan is important, but they ask us to, on a yearly basis, come back to them in a strategic session, talk about the business, act as the facilitator, because sometimes they get too bogged down into their own detail and they don't always understand fully or what alternatives are available. So that is a real advantage to this program. The final product, like I said, you'll get is a 5 to 7 page report that will act as a roadmap. That report will contain the business strategies as discussed and objectives. Will give you a very nice summary as to what your goals are, what needs are to achieve those goals, and how to achieve those goals. It will give, if you select it, to give you an estimation as to what the value of your company will be through the process. It will give you a ratio analysis, as Bongiwe has said before, which we, through our research, has seen that most often does indicate value for shareholders. So that will be given to you in the report as an easy to understand and in a graph format with a comparison as to what your initial objectives or forecasts were, and also what the market best practice is. And that's a nice management tool just to measure yourself as to how you compare to your competitors. We give you break-even points in case something goes wrong. And of course, like I said, we give you a very simplified income statement and balance sheet for all the scenarios that we planned for 1 year to 5 years. So that is a nice item that you can use to measure your actual results against. So it's a very summarized report, but clearly set out, very practical and very flexible, as I mentioned before. This is an example of one of the pages where we give you the ratios and say, okay, through the recovery phase, this is where the business will be, but then at the recovery age, this is what we anticipate if your plans are implemented. This is your ratios, for example, compared to what your competitors or best practice or benchmarking does. So there's a nice little management tool that you can do, and it's available for you to use. So that is basically what I have to present to you today. So I'm going to hand over now to Ishan that will facilitate the session on any questions that might have come up while we present it. So thank you for listening to me and have a good day.
Thank you to Jaime and to Bongi. You know, the one thing that I love about working with chartered accountants is always the ability to be on time. So ladies and gentlemen, we have just less than 10 minutes left. So I'm going to pose 2 quick questions to both Jaime and to Bongi. And, you know, if I can just ask them to be concise in their answers and and be as quick as possible so that we can just have 2 minutes at the end to wrap up. So, to Bongi, one of the takeaways that I got from your presentation is that you say that the clients have to probably go back 3 years when we're doing the pre-crisis modeling. Maybe just explain to us why you go back 3 years and not necessarily 1. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, you spoke about core priorities and strategic themes. Just remind the participants again, please, who determines those and why it's important. So I'm going to hand over to you to please answer those 2 questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you for those questions as well. I think that, when we did our research and we were looking at a base as to where we start, it was quite evident that the budgets of the current year were no longer relevant. The actuals of the current year were not sufficient, and therefore we extended, the trend analysis into 3 years. First and foremost, it's very important for us to be certain that are we in this particular position in 2020 because of a business that has been on the downward trend irrespective of the pandemic, or it has actually been thriving, and we could quite see through the analysis of the numbers the downturn in terms of the 3rd year, which is the current in terms of basic. So that's quite important for us to segment, because the solution space needs sight of that, and it needs to be it needs clarity that what are we actually dealing with here. We're dealing with a resilience factor that needs a reshape, and it could, or we are dealing with a legacy kind of problem. So that's number 1. In terms of the core themes that come out, this is a combined conversation between the shareholders in the business, the management, and I'm quite conscious that when we are talking about privately owned business, that might be the same person. So to simplify it, it is whoever has the responsibility and influence on the strategic direction of the business. That is a critical person. As Jaime has also, unpacked, is that it might not be one person. There's a team, however small or medium that team is, that is the essential people that we would love to get into the room so that we can unpack these matters. I do want to say, clients must not also be nervous of how am I going to come up with core themes? What are they talking about? I think that our experience is particularly focused that we're asking the right questions that can get to the drill down of information that we need. So we'll position ourselves in that space to ask those pertinent questions, to get out of it the answers that we would like, and also entertain the medium conversation that needs to happen.
Okay, thank you, Bongi. Jaime, to you, a bit of a difficult question, quite honestly, is, at what point do we tell the client that, in our view, from a sustainability point of view, the business does not look like it's going to survive? Because I think one of the Mazars' approach is that we must be pragmatic and honest with our clients. We don't want to lull them again into a false sense of security. So, what kind of makes those determinations? That's the first thing. The second thing is just please remind the participants again, high level, that once they complete the online assessment, what can they expect?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, thank you for the difficult questions. It's unfortunately the sad reality of what we're facing at the moment is that we as business advisors to our clients will have to have that difficult conversations with our clients. So when we go through the process, as we meet with management in that first session, and we see that there are no outs for that business, we're not going to tell the client immediately there. The partner will most probably come back to the office, discuss it with our business rescue practitioners or liquidations and see if there are alternative options. We'll really try to explore all the options that we have. But failing that, if there is really no feasible, practical option for them available to rescue the business, then we'll have the hard conversation with them and guide them through the process as well. Unfortunately, that is reality, but also fortunate with that is that we're not going to leave the client at that stage. We have a liquidations and a business rescue department that can assist further with the process should that be the only outcome for the discussion we have. We're not here also to sell you a product just to have a nice piece of paper in front of you. If we do believe right from the outset, looking at your business, that there's clearly no advantage of going forwards, then we'll stop you there and say, let's discuss this further, regroup, come back, and let's take it from there. The second question that you posed was, what can people expect once they do the online process? Like I said, heat map will be generated for me. I will then assign an industry expert or the relevant consultant. That person will then make contact with the person that put up the name in that online survey. And then from there on, between those two parties, the timelines will be set as when to meet, when to report back, and so forth. One thing I failed to mention is that it does depend on the complexities of the business and what are the needs and what information is available. But the process normally takes about a week if everything runs smoothly and all information is available. But we find most practically that's about 2 weeks for us to come to the final product. So that's basically the timeline that can be expected once the initial engagement has started. Also, I have to mention that once you completed the online survey, email is done to me automatically, immediately. So the partner should be in contact with you in the next 24 hours after you submitted the survey.
Hami, thank you very much, and thank you to you, Bongi. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your participation and your attention. For me, just to recap, the outcome of the Reshape program, is a detailed business plan that has a clear view of a 3 to 5 year period that offers forecasts across profit and loss, balance sheets and cash flows, and enables businesses to make informed decisions on the way forward through the crisis. This is not about COVID-19. COVID-19 may have precipitated this, and it's not even about Mazars helping you. It's about privately owned businesses and smaller and medium businesses now being jolted into realizing that there needs to be some science behind their sustainability. And it's about giving you a pragmatic and practical way to go about doing that. We appreciate that this is a challenging time for all businesses. We're here to support you, Today with us, we have CEOs to CFOs to PhD students. We even have a chief bottle washer as part of the participants. We appreciate the joke behind that. If any of you would like to set up time to discuss, please do not hesitate to get in touch with any of us. We'd love to see how we can help you, flourish during these challenges times. It's not only about survival, it's about flourishing. So thank you again. I hope that you have a pleasant rest of the Tuesday. And with that, I officially end this webinar. Cheers, everybody.